Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Tuesday to you. It's another hot one out here today, and it looks like those highs are going to be hitting 100 degrees here before the afternoon is over. Let's take a look at, we got a lot to going on here. We still have what's left of Tropical Storm Debby, which may actually move back out over water here over the next maybe few hours or so and could have a chance for some strengthening. We also have a tropical wave that we're watching out over the Atlantic Ocean. And we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the extended models going out a couple of weeks as well. And also on top of that, the team over at Colorado State University has updated its seasonal forecast yet again, and they're still calling for a very active season. We're going to talk more about that coming up a little bit later on and kind of dig into why they're thinking that the season remains going to be pretty active and well above normal. In fact, some record-setting numbers are still in their package that they're showing, so we're going to have to watch out for that. And as we go through, we'll look at the numbers and why they're thinking that those numbers are going to stay quite high. So again, it is a sunny day, a very hazy and sunny day across Acadiana. Very hot too. There's a look at some of our traffic cameras across Acadiana, and you can see that there aren't too many clouds in the sky with those cameras that actually can see the sky there. And we don't have any rain on land, but we do have a few widely scattered showers and thunderstorms. It looks like a couple of showers have just recently popped up there over parts of St. Mary Parish. So if you're out there south of the Intracoastal Waterway in St. Mary Parish, maybe down here right around Morgan City, you could probably see some cloud tops off to your south. Looks like most of this is staying away from Highway 90, and then we've got some showers that are in the offshore waters, and it looks like our sea breeze is starting to pick up there, stretching over southern Cameron and into southern Vermilion Parish. So perhaps we could see some more showers and thunderstorms developing in the coastal sections, but most of us are going to stay just hot and dry over the rest of the day today. So let's go ahead and get into Tropical Storm Debby. The numbers are there on the left-hand side of the screen. 31.9 north, 81 degrees west, winds are at 40 miles per hour, and the pressure has come up to 999 millibars. The center of circulation basically right there along the South Carolina-Georgia state line, and we do think that the center of circulation is going to move back out over the water for a while, and then possibly move back inland here over portions of North Carolina. So in the forecast officially from the National Hurricane Center, the forecast has some strengthening, perhaps getting it back up to a 55 or 65 mile per hour tropical storm. There's no forecast that's showing that this is going to re-become a hurricane, but the big problem, of course, is going to be all of the water, the rain that's coming down there over the Carolinas. But Tropical Storm Debby is still forecast to just meander here for a couple of days, and I don't think the Carolinas are going to be rid of Debby until sometime on Friday, when we've got a trough that's going to dig across the Great Lakes, and that should pull that out to sea. And I'll tell you more about that trough a little later on too, and how that's going to affect our forecast. So I was looking at this on Friday and Saturday, even texted some of my old meteorology friends in TV and saying, are you seeing this? Because a cool front in August, it has happened. In fact, 20 years ago, believe it or not, if you were not here 20 years ago, we had temperatures at night in the 50s in August of 2004. I don't think we're going to see anything like that, but I do think we're going to see a little bit of a change. But that will be the thing that will finally push Debby away. But there's still that 5-day rainfall forecast. And even though the rainfall forecast is a little bit less than what I showed you yesterday, you do have to remember that many of these areas have already picked up 5 to 10 inches of rain. So if you're going to add 16 to 20 inches of rain on top of that, you're still going to be looking at some of those earlier forecasts of 25 to 35 inches of rain that could fall. So we do have a flood event that will be happening along the East Coast. And I don't think it's going to be reserved for the Carolinas. I believe it's going to go ahead and run all the way up the I-95 corridor through some of the bigger cities too. So that may be in the news here over the next couple of days. Debby is still causing some significant waves, mainly over the Atlantic, but there are still some rough seas in the far eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. But locally, we're looking at 1 to 2 foot seas in our new nearshore waters, and about 2 to 3 foot seas in the far offshore waters. If you got some friends that are out there boating or fishing today, they're probably looking at a pretty decent day. If you have family or friends that are working in the far offshore waters, especially maybe over the eastern Gulf waters off the coast of Mississippi and Alabama, they may be seeing some higher swells, but it is a pretty nice day out over the Gulf of Mexico, other than some of those outer bands that are there over Florida, and then we've got those widely scattered showers that are occurring there off the Louisiana coast, but fair weather for the most part now over the Gulf of Mexico. The Caribbean, western part of the Caribbean and Central America, we do have a flare-up of some thunderstorms here off the Nicaraguan coast and here off the Costa Rica and Panamanian coast here. Just a lot of moisture that's going to go ahead and continue to drift off toward the west. Might have some chances for some development on the Pacific side if it can hold together. The tropical wave that many of you are probably tuned in for is right about here, and that's going to continue to drift across the Caribbean Sea. We're going to go into more details about that particular tropical wave and what the models are thinking here in just a couple of minutes. But I do want to just real quick look at the tropical Atlantic, where we do have a few tropical waves that are kind of working their way across, one about right here and a pretty robust one that's out here over the coast of Africa. And I'll tell you, looking at some of the extended models, it does appear that there's going to be more of these tropical waves coming off the African coast. And the more that we get these tropical waves to move across the Atlantic, the more it's going to erode some of that dry air and Saharan dust that's been out there that really essentially shut down the hurricane season for a good chunk of the month of July. But now that we're into August, and especially as we get into September, I'm sure we're going to see this activity increase as we go through the next several weeks. So with the tropical weather outlook, you still have Debby that's there right along the east coast of the U.S., and then we also have that tropical wave that's currently moving across the Caribbean Sea. We don't think we're going to see any development here in the near-term future, so days 1 and 2, probably about a 0% chance that we'll see any development. But if this wave tends to hold on and maybe makes its way into this area, it might have a chance for development sometime maybe day 3, 4, 5, or 6. So we're talking about the end of the week and the early part of the weekend. But really, it's a pretty low chance, and I will tell you that most of the models aren't very turned on by what's going on in the Caribbean right now. So let's go ahead and go through some of the model suite here. And this is the GFS, and we're just going to kind of let it roll here through August the 15th, where you see Debby making a move out of the way, and then you really don't see a whole lot after that. But I did want to stop this on Sunday the 11th, and the tropical wave that we're currently watching over the central Caribbean is probably represented right about there. Not really showing any pressure drops there, but we are seeing additional moisture over parts of the Bay of Campeche. But farther down the road, it is showing a little bit more moisture and maybe the possibility of some development here, kind of where hurricane and what became Tropical Storm Debby, when it was starting to get going here over the northern Leeward Islands and then pushing over toward the Bahamas. But again, that isn't until Friday, August the 16th. And the extended model kind of puts a little bit of a low pressure area over near the Bahamas. And it is kind of similar to what we're seeing with the Euro model. This is the Euro model. Again, we'll just go ahead and let this roll all the way through August the 15th. You see Debby making an exit, and you see a good amount of tropical moisture working westward out of the Caribbean and perhaps into the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. And then at the end of the loop, you're starting to see a lot more moisture, and yep, even a low pressure area there north of the Bahamas. So again, like we did with the GFS, I'm going to go ahead and stop here on Sunday, August the 11th. So the tropical wave that's currently right here would probably be represented with this amount of moisture that's right about in this particular area here over the southern part of the Bay of Campeche. But the Euro also not really showing any pressure drops. So again, not too concerned about this tropical wave here as it moves off toward the northwest. I think it'll probably just be bringing some rains to Central America as well as portions of the Bay of Campeche. But you go another week out and a tropical wave that's currently kind of just drifting its way off the Atlantic coast, or rather the African coast, will be working its way across the Atlantic Ocean and then might have a chance for some development here once it gets just north of the Bahamas. So again, this is going out to Friday, August the 16th. So that's a week from this coming Friday. So you're talking about, what, 10 or 11 days away. But right now it is focusing on another tropical system trying to develop over portions of the Atlantic Ocean. Let's go ahead and move along to the Canadian model, and we're going to roll this one through August the 15th, and it also has an exit of Debby. But you might notice there is a little bit of a blip there over the Caribbean Sea, and I'm going to stop it here on this Saturday. So that's this weekend. Still looking at this particular tropical wave, and this is it right here. The Canadian right now is the only one that actually is showing a low pressure center over the Bay of Campeche, and then this extends its way off toward the west and makes landfall here somewhere over northern Mexico. So that would not be a threat for us here along the Gulf Coast here in the United States. The Icon model, on the other hand, really isn't showing a whole lot of anything. The tropical wave that's moving across the Atlantic starts to bring in a little more moisture here over Central America, and it kind of moves off toward the west. And it also doesn't really show anything in this area, except you can kind of see a bit more moisture starting to roll here across the northern Leeward Islands, Virgin Islands, and over to Puerto Rico toward the end of this loop. So what we're seeing out here with this extra moisture in the part of the Atlantic Ocean might be something that the Euro is also seeing. So not anything real definitive out there, but there's signs that it is going to continue to stay somewhat active. Are we going to end up having any more tropical storms in the next couple of weeks or hurricanes? Not really sure right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we at least see one named storm come up here in the next couple of weeks based on what the models that I'm seeing right here, mainly because some of the stuff that we're seeing developing is more likely over toward Puerto Rico and into the Bahamas. And it isn't until sometime late next week. So we're just going to have to wait for the models to kind of get their act together. And because everything that seems to be wanting to develop is going to be more than a week away from where we are right now, unfortunately, we have to stay with these global models, and global models aren't necessarily as good at grasping developing tropical systems. They are way better at determining intensity and direction of tropical systems after they've formed, and especially after they start to get some of that recon data pushed in there as well. But during the month of August, we always have additional named storms that come through. Generally, we have about 4 named storms on average during the month of August. So far, we've only had 4 named storms, but we're still ahead of schedule because we really don't reach the 4th named system until about August the 15th. So we are ahead of schedule, but so far, it really hasn't shown this robust, big-time outbreak of storm after storm after storm based on some of the predictions from some of the teams out there. And that's why I wanted to get into the Colorado State University forecast. And they have revised their forecast back down, but their number is still at 23. Their initial forecast that came out during the month of April did have 23 named storms, which would exhaust the hurricane name list, and also it would be pushing us into the auxiliary list as well. So they're still going with a very high total of named storms. And even though we might be thinking, wow, 23 is a big number when we've only had 4, because this does include Alberto, Beryl, Chris, and Debby, as you can see there on the bottom of the graphic. So they're basically saying we're going to have 19 named storms between now and the end of the hurricane season. And there might be a few of you out there that think that that's unrealistic. Well, really it isn't, and I'm going to explain that here in just a minute. But they're still calling for 12 hurricanes, and they're still calling for 6 major hurricanes. So those numbers have not changed. And as you can see, they are way above the averages from 1991 to 2020. So that would be your 30-year average. That's kind of what we tend to look at. We look at 30-year averages to get our climatology information there. So way above normal on that. Of course, the Colorado State folks, as well as all of us, we know that those water temperatures are sky high, and we also know that the tropical cyclone heat potential is sky high as well. For those of you who don't understand this graphic, this is a version of where your 80-degree water is at the surface, and then the darker your red shade is the deeper that 80-degree water goes. So if a tropical system is to work over that area, it can still be able to churn water from below the surface and still be able to tap into water that's above 80 degrees, and therefore it would still have the premium fuel it would need to continue to develop. So the big reason that most of the forecasts have come out showing that we were going to see an active season was because a lot of the models were predicting that we were going to go from El Nino to a La Nina season toward the peak of the hurricane season. And La Nina is a measurement of waters that are out here, out in the Pacific Ocean, that tend to get cooler than normal. And it's kind of a cyclical thing. It goes up and down. You go from El Nino, then back to La Nina. So El Nino is when those waters are warmer than average, and La Nina is when they're cooler than average. And we are starting to see the trend that these waters have been cooling down and will continue to cool down. And when you go into a La Nina season, you typically have more tropical activity over the Atlantic Ocean. And I'll explain why coming up here in just a sec. But as far as the model data, it is still predicting that we're going to stay in a more neutral zone here through the month of August. So blue would be El Nino, gray would be neutral, and red would be El Nino. So this is basically predicting where we think it's going to go. But for that July, August, September, and the August, September, October, November, you can see it's more likely that we're going to be transitioning to La Nina based on these models. And then the other models that are showing the next several months are showing that we're still here kind of in this neutral zone at the beginning of the graphic, but as you go farther down along through the rest of it, you can see that we're seeing a little bit more of the possibility that this is going to be shifting into more La Nina territory. I can't say that it's super strong La Nina. It looks like a fairly weak La Nina, but we're right here right now within the neutral zone, and we should be dropping down below that here over the next several weeks and several months. So why does La Nina increase hurricane activity over the Atlantic Ocean? Well, it tends to lighten up the trade winds or the wind shear. And when you have vertical wind shear, these developing tropical systems just kind of get the tops blown off of them. And you can see that in that graphic at the bottom. And what happens is not only can it blow off the tops of these tropical systems as they're trying to form in the initial stages, but it also kind of keeps that tilt from the eye or the center of the circulation, which is up here, down here at the surface, to where you get the exhaust up here at the top of the atmosphere. And when it's straight up and down, you have a more efficient engine. And when it's tilted like this, it doesn't tend to develop quite as easily or quite as rapidly. But when we're in a La Nina period, like you see up here in this top graphic, with less vertical wind shear, your tropical systems get better vertical stacking and therefore become more of an efficient engine. So your center of circulation at the surface is here, and then the exhaust comes out at the very top, and it basically just has to go straight up. As the thunderstorms develop all around this particular hurricane, because there's no wind shear, it can't break through and break down some of these thunderstorms and allow dry air to get into the core, which would eventually kill the hurricane or at least make it weaken. So when you have less vertical wind shear, you end up having not only more powerful hurricanes, but sometimes even the weakest tropical systems have an easier time forming when there's less vertical wind shear. So those are some of the reasons why the Colorado State University numbers basically have not changed a whole lot. Even though they did run it up to 25 in their last forecast, they've dropped it back to 23, which is still a very, very busy season. And also, when you start thinking, oh, are we really going to have 19 named storms between now and the end of hurricane season? Well, back in 2020, we had 9 named storms formed during the month of September alone. So definitely it can. And real quick, I wanted to go back to talk about that trough that is eventually going to be pulling Tropical Storm Debby away. There is some forecasts that are putting an upper level low here over parts of the Great Lakes that could possibly send a cold front in our direction, actually a series of cold fronts, and it might arrive here on Saturday. So the good news is I think we're finally going to break the streak of 100-degree days, but on the bad side is it's really only going to cool our temperatures down to normal, which is still the low 90s. But there is a little bit of better good news in there. I do think with that northerly flow, it could bring down some dry air. So 93 or 94 degrees might only have a heat index of about 100 to 105. So I know that still sounds brutal, but by Louisiana standards, a heat index of under 105 is actually a pretty decent day during the month of August. So let's keep our fingers crossed. I didn't want to mention it on Friday, and I actually didn't even want to mention it during the day yesterday because I feel like I would have been jinxing it. But there is a model late on Friday that I was really excited because it was showing some overnight low temperatures here in Lafayette down to 65 degrees. Can you even imagine? So hopefully we'll get that cool front to come through to help sweep Debby out of the way, and maybe we'll get a little benefit to it as well with some cooler temperatures and some lower humidity as well. Well, that's all I got for you on this Tuesday. If you like Let's Talk Tropics, please like this video and subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications as well. Follow my social media posts as well. I'm on Facebook at Dave Baker, Acadiana Weather Today, and on X or Twitter at Dave Baker TV. And I usually put any kind of other things that aren't emergencies there on my social media, especially with the updates on the tropical weather. So I hope all of you have a great day. Stay cool. We'll look out and see if those temperatures do hit 100 degrees later this afternoon. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker, and I will see you on Wednesday.